Alright, now that we've been distracted by outside stuff here, so in this case, we were working on the turn method. So we send the player message turn to this, and we get a vector2 turn axis. So in this case, now we need to look at how... I'm actually coming over here to my other code to look at it. So now we need to go to player manager, or player movement, and we're going to do the turn method here. So to turn, we're going to start with our X turn. So in this case, we're going to say we're going to create two values in the head here, which are I can't find the word for it now. Basically, the changes in X that we get from our mouse. Remember that it's just a change in X, not the X position. So in this case, we want an actual change in X. We want to find the angle from whatever the change in X is. So we're going to create a float rotation X, and then we're going to create a float rotation. R-O-T-A-T-I-O-N. Why? Wow. I need to figure out how to type. Okay, so now that we have our turn axis, we're going to do just exclusively the x-axis for right now. So we're going to do rotation x plus equals, so it combines the axis, turn axis dot x. So it's going to combine that x into a rotation value that it then applies to the rotation of this current object. So then after you do that, we're going to transform this object. So this dot transform. Surprise that all objects have access to the current game object's transform. So in this case, we can just turn it right here, transform, and we're going to look at local Euler angles. So the local Euler angles that we're looking at are going to be the X, Y, and Z rotation angles. So right now, we want it to turn over its Y-axis like it was a pole directly through it, and then we were spinning the object around it. So in this case, we're going to create a new vector3, and then this vector is going to be 0 for the x-axis, because we don't care about the x-axis, and it's going to be our rotation x for the y-axis, because we want it to rotate rotation x around the y-axis, and then it's going to be 0 for the z position. So it's not rotating over the x, and it's not rotating over the z. Basically, it's not going face forward, and it's not turning sideways. So it's turning over its y-axis by rotation x. So let's see how that works. Let's go back to our game here. Clear all those line warnings, and we're going to fire up our game here. Now when I move the mouse left or right, that's because we haven't actually, the player doesn't have the mouse input yet. It's because I was showing you on the game object, I didn't actually move it. So mouse input attached to the player. Let's run this again. And you can see that the player rotates over the x-axis as intended. So I'm looking all around here. And you can see that also over here if I select the player. And then you can see that the camera is now panning around in a circle. Now it's not looking up and down because I'm only rotating this way. And that's because we don't want to do what we just did for the X for the the top look. So let's assume that we wanted to do the exact same thing. So let's look at that real quick. So instead of rotation X, we're going to look at rotation Y with the turn axis of Y. So that's going to let us look up and down, right? And then we're going to so we want to look over the, in this case, we were looking over the Z axis, because the Z axis is the one that points directly out in either direction. No, sorry, it's the x-axis. We want to go over the x-axis because that's the one that points out in either directions from the side. So that when we rotate over it, we lean forward and then we lean back, right? So in this case, we're going to want the y value to be 0, but instead have the x-axis be rotation y. Now we're going to see why that's a bad thing in a very, very quick moment. So we're going to pull this. Come on. You know you want to. Pull this over here. Let me make this a little bit smaller, because we're going to want to be able to see what's happening to the player object in our scene here. So, our player falls. Now if I want to look up, it bends the whole capsule backwards. And I can whole capsule forward, whole capsule backwards. So I can kind of like jump if I move the mouse properly because of the collision. But overall, this is not the intention. Obviously, think about being a human being. You don't like lean forward and lay on your face to look at the ground. You turn only your head to look at the ground. So in this case, this is not the intended. It does work. It does in theory work, right? But there's the small problem is that the turns over the X no longer work very well. The Y turns work, but the X turns do not. So instead of doing a transform local Euler angles on this, we want to only do the camera. We want the camera to look up and down. So we want to do camera.transform. Now camera we don't have, so we're going to go up here and we're going to create a camera object, call it cam, right? And so in this case, we're going to want to get the camera object. But we can't, because the camera object isn't actually a script on the current player, we can't just use a get component camera. In this case, we have two options. We can either use find, and we're going to find the main camera in the scene, or we can use another interesting one. We can make this public. So by making this a public value, let's move this up to the top here to keep everything in nice, neat, tidy order. By making the camera public, we now have access to it over here in the scene, in the inspector for the player. You'll notice cam now shows up. Actually, you know what? I'm actually gonna change that to camera, because it's gonna bother me that it's not called camera over here. So camera over here in the scene. And so we're going to come over here to player, and we're going to see that main camera object that's attached to it. We're going to change the name of it to player camera because I like player camera better. We're going to look at the player object, and then we're going to drag the player camera over to this field here. The other thing we could do is there's a little dial select, and you'll see here that player camera, either in the scene, there's a none or player camera. In this case, we're going to select player camera. So that means we now have a reference to the player camera. So we can come back here and do camera transform Euler angles, rotation Y over the x-axis, so it looks up and down. So let's see how that works out in the game. Pull this over here. So we look up, we look down, we can rotate left and right, and we can look up and down. Beautiful, right? So look, And so the camera, if you look at the object in the window there, the camera looks up and the camera looks down. Now we only have one problem left to solve here, and that's that I can do this and look all the way up and flip the whole world over. So we can so right now the head can roll all the way 360 degrees. So we don't want it to be able to do that. Humans can't do that. It's not a thing. It's not a thing that humans can do. So we want to clamp this rotation value to some value. In this case, I actually already know what the value is, so we're going to go float min camera clamp equals -60, and then float max camera clamp equals 60. And then we're going to come down here and use the clamp function. So in this case, math f, which is a math, it's a group of math functions. So you'll learn, and over time using Unity, you'll learn to use other ones. But in this case, we're looking at clamp. Clamp takes a float value. In this case, we're looking at rotation y, and it clamps to the min camera and the max camera clamps, and then spits out another. So we want this to be rotation y equals mathf clamp. So what this does is this means that I can't look up more than 60 degrees, and I can't look down more than 60 degrees. So let's come back here to our script, or to our game, and see that in practice. So now you can see I can look down, but oh, did I not save the script again? Let me double check with how I do it over here. Minimum y is 60, -60, maximum y is 60, yep. Min is -60, max is 60. Rotation y plus equals y. Rotation y equals mathf clamp rotation y min max. Oh, maybe it's a negative rotation y. That might be it, but I'm not double sure. So then if I look down, yep, okay, that's exactly it. So you'll see that if I look down and I keep trying to look down, I can only look down at my shadow. And then if I look up, I can only look up into the sky, but I can't flip over like I did before. So now we have our camera controller, and you'll see that if I press forward, I can still move. And if I turn and press forward, I still move. And that's what I was mentioning earlier about the movement player relative force. So regardless of which direction I've turned the object, I press forward and it always goes forward. So you have a beautiful first-person controller. So this is the player. So on our next video, we're going to create our level a little bit. We're going to flesh out the level, and we're going to add materials to all of our objects so they look colored, so they don't look like white, because white gets really obnoxious when there's a lot of it.